Have you ever thought that one little detail can change your life forever? My life changed when I accidentally discovered that my wife was cheating on me. But what she didn't know was that I noticed one detail that was the key to unraveling her whole mystery. I wasn't going to stop until I found out the whole truth and made her regret her actions. In this video, I will share with you all my story and how one little detail was the beginning of my revenge. I will try to tell you a story about how lines on the internet can not only glue, but also destroy family life. I should say at once that it was not a matter of banal correspondence and social networks or anything like that. It turned out to be a lot more complicated than that, although I did find the end in the end. We got married with S Assei when I was in my early 30s, and she was turning 24. She was a recent student, and I already had my share of general business with friends. Asia was looking for a job at the time and found one right under our noses. Not far from home, if specifically in my apartment where we lived, there was a 24-hour pharmacy kiosk. Asia got a job there as a pharmacist. Unlike the pharmacies where she had been employed before, the salary here was a little higher. All because this place worked around the clock and the shifts were accordingly paid higher. I initially objected to such working conditions for a young wife, but I objected solely out of fear for Asia's safety. When I got to their pavilion before her employment, I was reassured. Turns out their pavilion was securely locked from the inside at night. There were bars on the windows, and everything was sold from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. exclusively through a small iron window. There was also a so-called panic button inside. Since I didn't see any other dangers for Asia at the time, I gave the okay. She settled in there. But who knew that doors and locks could only protect against external trouble? Now on to the inside. One evening, a situation arose at our house. "So what is it?" my wife said to me and pointed a finger at the monitor. On it was open correspondence with a colleague from my last job. She knew quite a bit about the subject in which we were now working with friends, and I often consulted with her and called her to work for us. Since it is not a question of deprivation and you do not ask a person, I sometimes, in addition to advice for decency, asked her how she was doing and how her health, and all sorts of thanks for the help. My wife, partly because of her age, did not appreciate such correspondence and threw me a scandal. I explained to her what I had just told you and the situation went away, but it turned out that only I thought so. Everything fell into place. We have a great life. Me and Assei don't have any beef with each other. The day comes, friends call for our schlicks. And, as usual, tomorrow business is such a thing. No one knows when it will be free for sure, well, when it will be an emergency. So here's a day free. That's it, let's go, or then we will not get together. I agree and start packing. My wife asks me why I have a bag. Our girls are calling, let's go too. I sincerely invited her to, though rather abruptly, tomorrow. She agreed at first and began to pack. The next day, we have to leave at lunchtime, and in the morning, Asia declares. Here the situation changes, I stay to work. I calibrated my wife's mood just in case, and she seemed to say without complaint, "Go young, go." All right, so I packed up and left. I'm not going to tell you how to make jokes in a man's company. It was possible to do without any of this. I say this to the fact that this evening, well into the night, on the phone with his wife, of course, I was not. Once I texted her, she was as expected at work. The next day, I returned to the city, arrived, took off all my smoky-smelling clothes, and rushed to the shower. On the way out, as was my custom, I got on the scale, and there in front of my 90 kilograms flashed the number 70. The scale, when you turn it on, first showed your previous weight, and then the weight of the person who stood on it now. Where did the 70 come from? It was definitely them. But Asia weighs 50, I weigh 90, but after the kebabs, maybe 92. Where did the 70 come from? I must say that after the kebabs, I was not thinking too much on this day, and a glimpse of Asia. And what is the number 70 there on the scales? I got the answer about my friend and went to sleep for at least an hour. This now I understand that before the kebabs I weighed after showering, and after them, too, was on the scales, and, respectively, no girlfriends here in this short time could not be. But this day my condition was not before the calculations. The next day, my wife went to work again. The day before yesterday, I was working an extra shift, but today it was my shift. All right, I drove her, and on the way back I lied to myself with some goodies and was already going to spend that evening and night alone with a computer. I dabble in computer games, not more than an hour and a half a week, but it happens. When you don't feel like anything and you're tired, they can be quite distracting and help you disconnect. Anyway, I turned on the computer, pressed the keys I use in the game, and heard something crunch. I turned the keyboard over. Crumbs fell down. It was leftover chips. All right, I started my game. It was of course the race, and here I strained a little harder. My car, which I use in the game, is not the way I left it. In this game, you could park right outside the house, and here it stands there. But not as I put it there for 5 years. Wife? No, it's definitely not her. Firstly, she was at work, and secondly, this game she does not know how to turn on. There's a whole algorithm, and she certainly did not suffer from love of games. There was a bad picture. Someone was in the shower, and was on the scales. Why girlfriends, even if it was her, and came here only for a couple of hours, run to our shower, and then to the scales, then take in their hands chips, and urgently go to the races on my computer. Even though I was beginning to guess which version here was the best fit for the whole thing, I took one last chance. Hey Asia, I called my wife, but this friend of yours did not leave anything here, well, or maybe her child. If my wife had been more diligent, she would have heard such a question. She would have said that her friend had a son, or said she could not talk now, thereby gaining time to think. Husband asks clearly for a reason, but apparently she was really busy there and in the confusion just said that no son with a friend does not. I see, there was probably someone else's son, and he weighed 70 kilograms. I sat at home for a few more minutes, but I couldn't stand it and wanted to ask my wife what was going on and what was going on personally. My wife is at work right now on the night shift, sitting there all night on the internet alone. Now probably one customer per hour, so she has time to explain. Arriving at the pavilion, I knocked on the back door. A male voice answered. There is a window at the other entrance. Knock there. It was Asia's husband. Open up. They opened for me. It was a guy of about 25 in a decent sweater, jeans, and a hairstyled head. Hello, whose husband are you? Asia's? I pushed him aside and silently stepped inside. Then I saw my wife's tablet with some movie, 2 cups of tea, and the fact that they were both in slippers. Now that makes sense. I shouted toward my wife at the guy. She's supposed to be on shift here by herself too, so what's this? I grabbed him by that sweater and was surprised that the guy didn't even resist. How much do you weigh? You don't weigh 70, do you? I was emotional. I wanted to do something interesting, but I remembered where I was. There were cameras here, and it would cost me more in the end. I took Asechka out of the pavilion, and then she started talking. And this is your colleague, these endless departures and all these shashliks. These are all your business trips, and often ditching the phone when I call. That kind of relationship can only come from your side. If we're free, then why am I the one who's suddenly making claims? So you're allowed to be there, including your colleague, and I'm supposed to sit here and wait. How unscrupulous can I be to cheat and then get blamed for it? My jaw didn't just drop. In fact, it was an admission of adultery, but the reasons for it exactly blew me away at the time. This guy was a fellow student of hers, and after the institute also began working in that pharmacy. Every time I let my wife go there, because I was 100% sure that the staff was exclusively female. Think back to the last time you saw a man's face in the pharmacy window. Well, here I am, probably once in my life. And it turned out that that very exception played such a role in my life. Yes, I probably had 1,000 ways to cheat, but I didn't use them. And as crazy as it sounds now, it turned out that I did not use them for nothing. Anyway, the next day after a sleepless night, my wife was packed up and moved out of my apartment. And now I'm sure computer games can definitely be useful, especially if my wife doesn't know how to turn them on. I'm ready to tell you a story that happened not too long ago. My girlfriend started getting regular massages, and I didn't suspect anything wrong at first. But as time passed, I noticed that she began to leave more and more often for massages, and at home she stopped doing me at all. I began to suspect that something bad was going on and decided to find out the truth. One day, I followed her and saw her cheating on me with a massage therapist. It was overwhelming, but I didn't let myself win for it. I decided to get my revenge, and I did it so powerfully that she would never forget her cheating again. I work for a trucker. I don't even remember how long anymore. And every year, yes, every month, I am convinced that my older comrades were right after all. I remember when I first started driving on our roads, they told me if you want to grow up fast, and in spirit and brains, you've chosen the most appropriate profession. The road, and everything connected with it, will teach you life faster than any institute. I think I agree. And as further proof, I want to tell you a story that happened to me just a couple of days ago. I was driving from my small town to a major city on a federal scale, and to him at the time, I was literally some 500 kilometers away. This time, I was on a trip alone, so I had no one to talk to and smoke with that day. You can't really talk on the radio where we communicate. For the sake of catching the road is not everywhere and not always, so I picked up a fellow traveler. There was snow in the street, but the temperature was jumping in the minus then in the plus, and the road was mush as a result. But in general, I'm going here in this mess. I look at the right side. Not far from the point on the sidelines is a guy with a large bag. I started slowing down. He quickly ran up to my cab, which had passed him by about 30 meters, and I opened the door in front of him. "Where to?" I asked him. He names a major city, which I am also passing by. He asks if there's room for him, promises to pay me well, and that sort of thing. I looked him over. His clothes seemed neat. A good speech, decent appearance. In general, I told him to jump in. He took his bag behind the passenger seat and left a small suitcase on his lap. He opened it, and I saw that it was not a big laptop. The kid turned out to be a local. His name is Stas. He is 28 years old, and he works as a computer guy. He is engaged in website design and, simply put, their development. We discussed with him his rather interesting work, had probably already traveled about 200 kilometers, and now we again had cellular connection. And then I actually paid attention to the little detail, which was the reason for this story. I see that Aldi calls on the phone, and each time introduces himself. "Hello, Masha. This is Stas, but remember so-and-so and so-and-so." Then he calls again. "Hi, it's Stasha, but don't you recognize him?" "It's me," and all calls of this kind. After the fourth or fifth such call, the connection stopped again, and we went back to our conversation. What's with the phone that no one recognizes you? It turned out to be simple and trivial. He told me that I had changed my number, along with a SIM card, as they say, a new life and a new number. Of course, with this phrase he intrigued me. He and I had about 200 kilometers ahead of us before he had to leave. So I asked him what was up. He sighed. "I just got divorced without getting married." "Yes, it happens, and how?" There was a clumsy pause. It was too much to ask about such a personal thing, so I kept quiet. But the guy apparently figured out that since he said "eh," he should say "I be," and that's what he told me. Anyway, it was a whole story, and it was finally over for me. I met my girlfriend. Her name was Irina. I was 26 at the time. She was a little younger, just finishing college. Over time, she and I began to spend more and more time together, and eventually began to think about how to be further. I had been working in my profession since college, and by the time I was 26, I already had some money. Of course, We didn't have enough money for an apartment, but I strived for it and finally bought it. A one-room apartment was a little bit in debt for what was mine. Ira and I moved there and basically began to live together. A year goes by, and I slowly got out of debt for the apartment, and I and Irina began to think about getting married. But I wanted to unwind to make a little more money so that after the wedding we could go traveling and be husband and wife, not to live in poverty and so on. In general, not to starve. The issue with the wedding began to put off a bit, and the mood of Irina literally changed by 180 degrees. And funnily enough, her work did not bring almost exactly nothing. We were kept, fed, and watered, practically by myself. In short, I work. We in the company transferred to a remote location, and then everything. After that, we were like a cat with a dog. And if before I could sit with the project at work until 8, and even until 9, now I work from home all day. And so I can see when my fiancée leaves for her job, and when she's definitely coming home. And from the looks of her face, I can see that my presence in my own house makes her a little nervous, and maybe not a little. Orders for work became a little less, and accordingly, we had to pull up with her a little bit. Here's the news that she literally drove out of his mind, though she told you the truth, especially in anything, and did not need. In short, I gave less money. Irina, if we are saving up for a good and bright wedding, I told her then we must certainly save up, not squander everything left and right. In general, I'll skip the intimate details of her apparent aversion to me. I'll tell you better how the end of it all began. Well, in general, banal. She was a couple of times delayed after work. It was about 2 or 3 days apart. My questions, what about what, were met with a hostile response. And the overall climate in our relationship became even more negative than before. But then, one day, she literally blossomed, cooked me something delicious, and in the evening came up with this question. Listen, but you want your future wife was the most beautiful in the world and the cutest. Then she money for fitness and massage, the more that now in a nearby fitness center discounts. In general, that night I apparently relaxed too much, and this is how I later returned the favor. I gave her money for a membership. She began to go to that fitness center in the evenings just for 2 or 3 hours. And she really began to plow through it with all her might. She would come in tired, with a bruise on her arm, then on her leg. Well, you there it. Let's be careful. Maybe you there to hire a trainer. I naively asked her then. She was denying me. Yes, I am at half strength, and the bruises are not a sport. It's a massage. You remember, I called you that fitness center. So the massage there turned out to be one of the best in town, so I did not trade it for anything else. So the days went by. At the same time, our intimacy got worse. And then after training, then a million more reasons. With time, her moods went back in the same direction. Again the complaints, all sorts of snorting and stuff. And then, at one point my back started hurting. I was working at the computer after all. I made an appointment with the doctor, but there was only an appointment for 8 days ahead, and I decided not to wait and endure a whole week to go and have a massage in the same fitness center, which has long been going to Irina, and then came full kaput. The administrator at the entrance told me with a happy face that they do not and never had any massages. There are dumbbells, soccer swords, and so on, but no massage and is not expected. That's interesting. I thought at the time and looked on the internet at other places for massage, went and did it there. I returned home in the evening and Irina was already at home. I wanted to ask what's the deal with a massage, but rephrased the question. Well, how is the massage? All the same there, it does not hurt. I asked her and got, of course, an affirmative answer. Everything is fine. I go to the same place and everything in this vein. I was emotional. Of course, showed her that no massage in the fitness center since its opening. Literally, a day later, she did not show up at home and only called me. I was thinking, what you and I said to each other yesterday, we'll get over it, and if we want to keep our relationship, we should live apart for a while. I think 2 weeks is a good amount of time. Don't you agree? I am a programmer, but I am not stupid. She had someone, but apparently she did not want to lose the comfort of me. Or maybe there was only entertainment and she had nowhere to go. She was not expected there. So I called her up, and she said again on emotion that she had gone on holiday with her friend. With her friend and her boyfriend. And also with them goes and someone else, and the male sex. So the men are sponsoring the banquet, and the 2 girlfriends are guests. I see, tell these sponsors to be careful with the bruises on you there. During this, well, like his massage, then told her on the phone. I must say that a man sometimes for the leap forward and upward have to sink to the deepest depths, or simply put to get a phone. I mean me, because I have long been going to move to a major city. And so that night, I thought that now is the time. In the morning, I posted an ad for the sale of that apartment, wrote my parents' general power of attorney, so that if I do not change my mind could sell without me. But I went to this big city, where you actually now and take me. He looked at me and took out a pack of cigarettes. He added that the worst part was that I had to take her things back to her parents' house, because I had hardly given them all her stuff when I was away, and somehow managed to avoid a lot of questions. I just told them that her daughter herself will tell you everything, but hinted that without an outsider here, unfortunately did not do. In general, I decided a hitchhike decided to go just to get away, not to sit on the train, and the things I have a lot of the first time and do not need. In general, it there soon arrives from the resort. All things at her parents', no apartment, my number is unavailable. In general, that's how for all her surprises for me, I also prepared a surprise for her.